Between the Jura Mountains of France and the Combe Plains of Switzerland sits a stretch of farmland that hides the most powerful machine ever built by man. Hidden beneath the farmland, 100 meters down, stretches a 27-kilometer circle of frozen steel and vacuum chambers, part of a vast underground particle research ring operated by the European Organization for Nuclear Research, known worldwide as CERN. Founded in 1954 by 12 nations determined to rebuild science after war, it became a monument to what humans could create when they refused to stop asking questions. It was built to probe the first moments of existence, to imitate the moment the Creator's design first hardened into substance. The physicists say they're chasing truth. The locals say they're trying to imitate God. When it powers up, the air thickens, the fences hum, and the fields above the tunnel vibrate with a rhythm that feels almost alive. The first full test in 2008 was meant to mark a new age of discovery. It ended in panic. A fault in one of the superconducting magnets triggered a chain reaction that caused liquid helium to burst into gas, racing down the tunnel at supersonic speed. The blast tore through the steel housing, freezing everything it touched. The roar was so deep it shook dust from the ceilings of buildings miles away. Cameras caught the tunnel, blooming white with frost before the feed died. 2 technicians swore they saw a human shape standing inside the vapor, tall, gray, and unmoving. When systems came back online, the footage was gone. CERN's official report called it a powering incident. Workers called it the ghost of Sector 3-4. Even now, engineers performing checks in that section do not stay alone for long. Rumors spread fast in the months that followed. Sensors continued to trip in sealed tunnels, and badge readers logged entries by non-existent staff. The hum of the magnets rose and fell like breathing through metal lungs. Some called it resonance. Others said the machine had developed a rhythm of its own. Those living in the towns near Geneva said the underground machine was never about science alone. It was about piercing the fabric of reality, twisting the same patterns that hold the universe together. They spoke of lines buried deep in nature, boundaries older than language, and how one day something on the other side might decide to reach through. And when strange arcs of light appeared over the complex one night, blue rings twisting above the hills, the scientists called it refraction. The people outside said it looked more like the sky folding over on itself, as if something below had started to push back. In the courtyard above the tunnels stands a bronze statue of Shiva Nataraja, gifted to CERN in 2004 by India as a symbol of balance between destruction and creation. For years it was nothing more than art, another gesture of international unity, until a video surfaced in 2016 showing cloaked figures performing a mock ritual beneath it. Security called it a prank, but after that night something in the atmosphere shifted. Guards began reporting metallic sounds from the tunnels long after shutdown, a slow, rhythmic ringing that echoed through steel like distant bells underwater. One technician claimed the statue's shadow bent seconds before the floodlights flickered, though the camera showed only static. No one could prove anything, but even the most skeptical staff stopped walking that courtyard alone. In a place where humanity studies the unseen, superstition takes root faster than logic. They've flipped the switch again. In 2025, parts of the machine came back online. Particle beams crawling through the tunnels after years of silence. The smaller accelerators, LENAC 4, PS booster, and SPS lit up in order, humming like caves, waking one after another. Stable beams returned, and the steel under Geneva felt alive again. But you and I already saw what happened with that ritual video recorded right there on site. Staged or not, it fed every theory about portals and the end of the world. CERN later admitted it was fake, a prank that got out of hand, but by then the damage was done. Once you've seen shadows moving under those floodlights, you don't forget it. And now as the hum grows lower and heavier, it's hard not to wonder if the prank just mirrored the truth. The question isn't whether they found answers. The question is what they might have disturbed. In 1942, the U.S. government quietly seized more than 60,000 acres of farmland buried in the ridges of East Tennessee, cutting off entire families from the land they'd lived on for generations. Within weeks, soldiers put up fences, armed patrols, and checkpoints that stretched as far as the Clinch River. Colonel Leslie Groves, who oversaw the Manhattan Project, chose the site for its isolation and proximity to power. An invisible city that could build something the world wasn't ready to see. Locals were told it was for the war effort, but no one knew what kind. Bulldozers tore through homes, filled wells with stone, and left only chimneys standing where families once ate dinner. They called it Site X, a name so ordinary it felt safe to say out loud. By the end of the year, Oak Ridge existed, but not for anyone who wasn't meant to find it. By 1943, Oak Ridge had grown into a city that spoke in code. Barbed wire circled every ridge, watchtowers glowed through the fog, and billboards ordered silence. "Don't talk, the enemy hears you." More than 75,000 people lived inside the gates, most of them hired to turn knobs, lift crates, and log readings they were never allowed to discuss. Naomi Brummett was one of them. Her family had been forced off their farm, and months later she was working at Y-12, enriching uranium she didn't know existed. The air inside the plants shimmered with heat, and the sound of machinery drowned out thought. Anyone who asked questions simply didn't come back. When the atomic bomb fell on Japan in 1945, Oak Ridge learned the truth from newspapers that called it the city that attacked Japan. For the first time, the workers understood what they'd been part of, and for many, the silence they'd kept suddenly felt heavier than ever.
Manhattan Project veteran Bill Wilcox describes how thoughtfully Oak Ridge was laid out and why it was such a remarkable place for the community.
It was just an amazing place. It was farmland, you could tell that, but there was construction going on everywhere you looked. Trucks and people just crawling all over the place, hammers and banging. Wooden structures going up everywhere. Roads, road machinery, nothing was paved, there weren't any sidewalks. Somebody, bless their hearts, when they cut down all these darn trees to put up a building or something, they had a sawmill and they used the lumber to make sidewalks. Had miles, 160 miles of boardwalks all over town. And Groves realized that it was important to have a feeling of a community where these scientists and engineers and top managers and their spouses and their children would feel at home, not like they were just off in a terribly temporary community. He wanted it to have a feel of a normal town, and that's why they did such a beautiful job on the layout of the community. And people were relatively happy. It was a great place to raise kids. And they had neighborhood schools and neighborhood shopping centers. There were buses here, loads of them, but most people could walk to a shopping center where there was a grocery store, a beauty shop, a barber shop, laundry, little strips, 12 of them all around the town. And there were 9 elementary schools, so most kids could walk to school. So the town was really a remarkable place.
After the war, the gates didn't open. They multiplied. The laboratories expanded deeper into the valley, carving new channels for pipes, wiring, and waste. Building 3515, the fission product pilot plant, was supposed to lead the next generation of research, separating isotopes from the byproducts of the reactors. Instead, it became one of Oak Ridge's buried secrets. When contamination spread through its ventilation shafts, the floors were sealed under concrete and the project quietly erased from the records. The radiation monitors above it never stopped ticking, even decades later. Engineers said it was harmless residual energy, but maintenance crews kept hearing the same faint vibration through the floor. Steady and patient, they joked that the building was still running without permission. Some of them believed it. Today, Oak Ridge looks calm and ordinary. Modern labs, clean streets, and a visitor center that tells the story of science and progress. Visitors now see parts of the old Y-12 plant and what remains of K-25, where workers once helped create the material used in the first atomic bomb. These areas are monitored and safe, but beyond the fences lie restricted zones where radiation still lingers in the soil. The old tunnels and sealed chambers remain buried, silent, and heavy with history. The locals say that on cold nights the air near those hills feels charged, and the ground gives off a faint vibration, steady and slow, like something far below is still alive. The government calls it harmless resonance, but those who've spent their lives here say it feels more like a heartbeat, a quiet reminder that what was created here never really stopped. You ever been out to the very tip of Long Island? Past the crowds, past the last coffee shop where the road turns quiet and the air tastes like salt and rust? That's Montauk. Out there stands what's left of a place called Camp Hero, officially, the Montauk Air Force Station.
They could fire a 2,000-pound shell 30 miles with accuracy. These were the big boys. This is the story of Camp Hero and its place in America's military history.
You may have seen this radar dish rising over the dunes on the desolate tip of Long Island, known as the End. Or maybe the forbidding signs that once warned visitors of some unknown danger. Camp Hero and its hidden past is a place of mystery and intrigue.
The public was never allowed in Camp Hero.
Montauk historian Henry Osmers took us where many had not been allowed.
They actually had guards posted on the highway so that if you didn't have business at the lighthouse or here, you were turned back.
This was during World War II when Camp Hero became a top-secret military base. German U-boats threatened the East Coast, and Montauk was considered a likely invasion point.
Part of what they call the East Coast Defense Shield, basically keeping an eye on things and making sure that there were no surprises. Two huge batteries, they're about 600 feet long, and each of those two batteries contained 2 cannons.
And yes, it's true, there are several tunnels underneath Camp Hero. Their purpose was to connect the batteries to each other.
So in the event there was any kind of an attack going on, they could communicate and go between these installations safely underground. They did fire the guns off now and then just for practice. The shock waves went all the way back to town, which is about 6 miles. There's some reports that say windows cracked.
Along with the hidden cannons, the U.S. military had another trick up their sleeve.
We're now in what is called downtown Camp Hero. It's a cluster of buildings that during World War II were disguised to look like a New England fishing village from the air. So if enemy aircraft were to come over, the guns would come up and they would just blast them right out of the sky.
It started back in 1942 as part of the coastal defense system during World War II. The Army built fake houses and storefronts to hide gun batteries from enemy eyes, real cannons buried under roofs painted like fishing shacks. When the war ended, the Air Force took over and folded it into the Cold War radar network. That massive tower, still standing, the ANFPS-35 was one of the most powerful radars ever made. Locals swore they could hear it hum for miles even after the power was supposedly cut in the early 80s. The government closed the base in 1981, but no one ever fully shut it down. The radar stayed upright, the cables still ran under the soil, and the property stayed fenced and guarded long after it was declared inactive. Beneath the pines and overgrown brush, there are sealed concrete tunnels that stretch toward the coast. Some were confirmed by old Army Corps of Engineers reports, ventilation shafts, power conduits, and blast doors welded from the inside. Former Brookhaven lab workers later admitted they hauled radar and electromagnetic gear out there during the 1960s and 70s. Nobody signed the manifests. That tower emitted fields strong enough to fry nearby TV signals, and residents started reporting headaches, nosebleeds, and nights when static on the television formed shapes that looked like faces. The Army brushed it off as electrical interference, but locals stopped camping near the fence after pets came home sick. That's where the Montauk Project stories start to bleed in. The rumors about experiments that supposedly pushed beyond radar. The first public mention came in the 1980s, mostly from a man named Preston Nichols.
So what's your background?
I'm essentially an electrical engineer. I have a BS degree, and My specialty was essentially receivers.
Okay.
As you can see, these are all receivers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a fanatic on receivers and radio gear.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taken out, and my job was to modify the big old radar transmitter for this special purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It started out with what we call the microwave oven experiments, where they just took a human being, stuck him in the building, focused the big antenna on him, pumped out 100 million watts of power, and hooked the people in that radar beam.
Mm-hmm.
And they got it to the point where they could actually type in a command to the computer, and the computer would pulse the transmitter, and the person would do it to some extent.
Mm.
Then...
So they were triggering mechanisms in the brain.
Don't know if
Through
it's
a
the
computer?
brain direct or the psyche. See, here we're getting to the question. Is your intelligence in the brain, or is it some quantum function that's outside the brain? I personally believe the brain is a computer interface and that your intelligence is outside the brain.
An engineer who claimed he worked there. He said the government was testing ways to control human consciousness using electromagnetic waves, something they called the Montauk chair. He described helmets wired into transmitters, sensory deprivation rooms, and test subjects chosen because no one would come looking for them. None of that's proven, but declassified CIA papers later confirmed that around the same period, other facilities were experimenting with psychic research and remote viewing. So even if half of Nichols' story was fantasy, the timing and technology were very real. People who went inside the base after it closed talked about scorch marks on walls, medical tables, and child-size restraints bolted into concrete. When the state finally reopened the area as Camp Hero State Park in 2002, they fenced off most of the old buildings and sealed the tower. Still, investigators and hikers sneaked in. What they found was unsettling. Radiation hotspots, corridors that went deeper than blueprints showed, and strange acoustic effects, whispers that carried from one room to another with no echo. In 2008, a film crew shot part of Montauk Chronicles there. The documentary included interviews with alleged witnesses like Albiolek, who claimed time manipulation experiments took place underground. You can take that for what it's worth. But those tunnels are real. The Army Corps verified multiple sublevels filled with standing water and corroded wiring, and a few are still off limits because the structure isn't stable. The radar dish, though dead for decades, sometimes shifts position between maintenance inspections, and nobody knows why. Today, Camp Hero is just another state park. People walk their dogs along crumbling trails and lay out picnics on top of sealed concrete. Most have no idea what's buried beneath them. The radar tower still stands, rusted, empty, and silent. But phones lose signal near its base, and compasses start to drift without warning. After a storm, the air smells like burnt wiring. Some locals say the tower still listens, even if nothing answers back. And here's the part most people don't know. The TV show, Stranger Things, was originally called Montauk. The Dever brothers wrote their first scripts based on this place. Missing kids, secret labs, strange machines underground. They changed the setting to Indiana for production. But the real story, the one that inspired it, still sits out there on the edge of Long Island, fenced off, humming, waiting. Tucked behind thick woods and a chain-link fence out on Long Island, Brookhaven National Lab looks like any other government research facility, but folks who live nearby have whispered about it for years. The lab opened in 1947 on what used to be Camp Upton, and it's been tied to nuclear research from day one. They ran reactors there, real ones, built to test atomic energy, and over time people in nearby towns started to notice strange things. Deer with twisted jaws, pets getting sick, odd smells in the air after rain. In 1997, a radioactive leak exposed the truth. Tritium, a radioactive form of hydrogen, was found in the groundwater under one of Brookhaven's oldest reactors. It forms naturally from cosmic rays, but this came from nuclear work. And once it hits water, it spreads fast. That's when the locals realized, The danger wasn't just old stories. It was right under their feet. Down below the surface, it gets weirder. Brookhaven's got miles of tunnels and old reactor buildings sealed off from the public. Some of those areas haven't been entered in decades. Engineers used to say their radiation badges would go dark by the end of a shift. A few claimed they'd hear voices echoing through sealed corridors or feel a strange pressure in the air like something heavy was watching. Brookhaven graphite reactor, shut down in the 60s, is still standing. It's like a time capsule from an era when the rules were looser and the risks were buried under paperwork. One worker said he saw a person walking across the control room on a monitor, even though that entire section was locked up. Maybe it was nothing. But some people who spent time down there say the place never really powers down, not all the way. Some places feel like they're waiting for something to turn back on. What a lot of people don't realize is that Brookhaven wasn't just about machines. They also worked with biological material, human tissue used in radiation research. Most of it was medical for cancer studies, but a whistleblower once claimed that some irradiated remains were quietly buried on site. No names, no markers, just barrels sealed and hidden. A few years later, construction crews reported hitting something underground that smelled like chemicals, or worse. It wasn't just a bad day on the job. It spooked them enough to shut down that section and rope it off permanently. Officials said it was routine, nothing dangerous, but they cleared the area fast and fenced it off for good. To this day, no one really knows what's under there. And maybe that's the point. Sometimes the biggest secrets aren't erased. They're just locked up and left to sink into the dirt. So what do you think was something buried out there? They never meant to dig back up. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Tucked along Ravenswood Avenue in the heart of Silicon Valley is a place that's been shaping the future longer than most people realize. SRI International, originally the Stanford Research Institute, opened its doors in 1946 as a post-war think tank. From voice recognition and the mouse to AI and military robotics, the innovations that passed through its labs read like science fiction turned real. But beneath the surface level brilliance, there have always been questions about what else was being tested behind closed doors, and who exactly was funding it. During the Cold War, SRI became a magnet for classified projects. What started as defense contracts turned into something stranger: psychic research, remote viewing, brainwave manipulation. Not just theory, but field-tested protocols reportedly used by intelligence agencies. And when they say the work was quiet, it wasn't just about keeping secrets, it was about what happened when no one else was supposed to be watching. One of the most infamous programs tied to SRI was Project Stargate, a government-backed experiment in seeing distant locations, using nothing but the human mind. While officially run by the Army and the CIA, SRI's role was foundational. Inside a quiet office building shielded by white walls and neutral signage, psychics were trained to visualize hidden military sites, locate hostages, even attempt mind-to-mind communication. Some of the results were written off as imagination. Others were labeled inconclusive but compelling. The public didn't hear much about it until the 90s, when documents began leaking. But even then, the strangest parts were redacted. Staff who worked in the lab claimed equipment would fail without cause, and certain rooms were inexplicably cold. Electromagnetic cold, they said. No draft, no airflow, just pressure, one contractor later said. It wasn't the science that unnerved him, it was the feeling that the building itself was absorbing what they were doing. A former technician once told a story about an experiment in 1975 where subjects reported not only seeing places miles away, but something looking back. According to him, one viewer panicked halfway through a session, claiming she'd been noticed by whatever was on the other end. The project supervisor told her to stop immediately and never spoke of it again. That session was pulled from the records. Another participant described seeing himself from behind as if he had briefly stepped out of his body. At least 2 researchers quit after claiming they had nightmares that lined up. Same locations, same dark figures. None of this made the official reports, but people who worked there said it wasn't uncommon. The term bleed through started floating around. moments when the subject couldn't separate the vision from waking reality. It wasn't a glitch in the equipment, it was something human that got stretched too far. Most people walking the halls of SRI today have no idea any of that ever happened. They're working on artificial intelligence, defense systems, and clean energy research, unaware that a few doors down sit the remnants of a chapter the institution no longer mentions. Those old rooms are locked now, sealed under new flooring and quiet renovations, but anyone who's spent enough time around government work knows this. Programs don't just end, they evolve. Files get moved, names get changed, and the trail goes cold. Maybe that's just bureaucracy, or maybe in places like this, silence is the only way to keep the past from waking up. If you want more conspiracy stories like this, subscribe and don't be afraid to stay with us until dawn.